Thanks for coming back. I wasn't sure anyone was going to come back.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I mean, I'm quite sort of blown away by those two talks. They were so different.
Yeah.
And in their tone, but I sort of learnt a lot in both of them.
100%. So much.
Absolutely. So, I hope I can round the evening off.
I think so, definitely. And welcome to Nicer Tuesdays. I'm excited to talk with you this evening. Maybe it's right here on the table. Last year you released a book. Congratulations.
I did.
Here it is, gorgeous.
It
show off the pig spine.
It was a nightmare writing it, but I enjoyed the images and putting everything in one place, trying to. Everyone's got books basically, and I didn't have one. And you go through the books, artist books, and you get to Degas, and then sort of Delvaux, and then you realise Della's not there.
Yeah.
So I just needed to have my name in those things. It's just a horrible ego thing, but I needed it.
And there were some alternative titles, I think, in the book.
There were. I mean, it was quite. There were alternative titles. I'll read them out. But basically, I settled with this one. And as a lot of you are graphic designers, I basically realised I had to have a title that was both positive and short, so it could be seen in bookshops. Because all the titles I'd come up with were they were really self-deprecating to the point of being actually negative. So they were like 30 years of hurt. You can't do that. That's not art. Call that art. What's the point of that? These are things that people have actually said to me. What were you thinking? And the other one was going to be call the midlife crisis. So
I like that one. That was good.
Yeah. But in the end, I settled with what you see on the screen, really, because I just felt I had to. I'm not necessarily a very positive person, but I needed to sort of make a positive statement about what I do and about art itself, I think. So that was why I came up with that.
And one of them you just said there was, you can't do that.
Yes.
Did someone tell you that once?
They did, about a project you're going to see. And it was actually an artist. And I told him I was doing the project with the miners, working on the miners' strike. He was absolutely horrified. And this was an artist who makes very hardcore work, literally. And he was like so upset doing this, that I was going to do this work. We'll talk about it in a minute, I'm sure. But he was very, very, he just couldn't understand how it could be made, basically, which was interesting.
Yeah. It's specifically very interesting to me because he said you can't do that, but you seem to be very good at getting people to do things and getting people on board to do things.
You know what? It's actually quite straightforward. Well, this is the project I made with a brass band. This is the brass band. Very traditional. At the time, they wouldn't allow women to be members of the brass band. They do now. Not because of me, but for a number of reasons. But, very traditional group of men, basically, if I can put it like that. Like, when I went on tour with them, it was like being on tour with two rugby teams, because there's 30 of them. And it was kind of felt a bit like that. And I'm not really into that sort of banter amongst men. But, what were we talking about?
You're good at getting people...
Well, basically, the thing is, I work a lot with the public. And I've never had a problem working with the public. Often the problems happen is when you go to an institution. You go to a museum or a gallery, but also other institutions. They are not used to working with the public, and they're a bit afraid of the public. But on the whole, the public are up for doing stuff, doing things, and working with an artist to do something that might be a bit different from what they might usually do. But people on the whole are up for it, making art or working with an artist. And I learnt that by calling the manager of this band, and I didn't use the word acid house because I knew that was a bad word to use because of the sort of drug stories of the late 80s, early 90s. And I said, I've got some contemporary electronic music that I'd like you to make, do versions of. And he said, okay, we'll just do it once and we'll see how it goes. And I was so nervous asking him. I thought I'd have to convince him over weeks and weeks, but he agreed immediately. And basically it's that power, the power of someone saying yes is what keeps me going effectively, what I rely on.
And why acid brass? Like, why did you decide to combine those two things?
Well, it's sort of explained here. Before I did the work, this is the explanation. It's like, how do you tell the story of a country through music in the 20th century? And how do you tell the story of a country going from being an industrial society to post-industrial you can actually do it through music. There's a narrative in music, and popular music is telling a story, but also is you can't separate it from history often. You know, when you look back, you realize how important the music was in people's lives, but actually it was telling you a story. There's a great quote, music is prophecy. It's an incredible quote, just those 3 words. I wish I'd thought of that, saying that, because it actually shows you the future, potentially, what a future could be like, how people could be with each other, about technology, about human relationships, and so on. So it was basically, how do these 2 things have anything in common, but they're all about communal music making and music making in the open air and communities effectively, but also about how the state will attack those communities, like either miners or trade unions or ravers who want to go into a field and dance. And that was like 2 or 3 years after the miners' strike. So the police treated them like they were striking miners effectively in their tactics and how heavy-handed they were.
Maybe we can actually go to that project, because you have
Which one?
Perhaps this, the Battle of Orgreave.
The Battle of Orgreave,
exactly,
yes.
here. So that's arguably maybe your most well-known, perhaps, to this day. I think in the book you call it your Stairway to Heaven.
I call it my Stairway to Heaven. You know, like it's the song I have to always play, in a sense, and this is it. This was me. I was wanting to recreate a battle I'd seen as a child on TV from the miners' strike, with thousands of people taking part as like a historical reenactment, but a political, historical reenactment. And this is a photograph from 1984, by the way. I did this in 2001. And this is a miner, clearly, from his physicality, I would say, talking to a Metropolitan Police officer who probably had done something very bad, because that's what they did. You know, the London police were by far the worst. And so it was, for me, trying to work out in my mind what had happened that day. So I wanted to restage it like the way you restage a crime. And but working with thousands of people. In the end, we worked with 1,000 because of the budget and many other things. I mean, on the day itself, the battle, there might have been up to 14,000 people involved, police and pickets and striking miners. And so we made it. That's a still from the film. Well, that's not even a still from the film. We made it with former miners, but also the majority of the men that took part were reenactors, because I really wanted to work with reenactors, because I wanted to sort of challenge their view of history, of British history, and get them to reenact a political battle from a war, effectively, a cultural war. And so people who do this at the weekend, I wanted them to just wear regular clothes or work or dress like a policeman, and then fight amongst the miners. They'd meet the former miners, which was very interesting. That's 2 worlds colliding, 2 versions of sort of political versions of men and masculinity sort of colliding. And they were the miners were in a minority. There's about 300 of them, and 700 reenactors, but they totally intimidated the reenactors because of their camaraderie and their sort of love for each other, effectively. Totally intimidated the reenactors. So we had to sort of swap things over a bit.
And then I guess that's super interesting to me, because we're talking about how we have, you know, 2 people or 2 groups of people who are coming at it from a very different angle. What was the approach of, how did you tell people who are ex-miners to get involved in this project? How did that word of mouth get spread? Or?
Well, it's word of mouth. You know, it took 2 years to meet people, for them to know who I was. I was just this funny little bloke from London who was interested in something that, in 2001, it was pre-Iraq War. It was New Labour, was in its height. The Labour Party wanted to bury the miners' strike and never mention it because it was embarrassing to them. So just the fact that someone wanted to talk about it, they could see that I was sort of on their side. And so I met progressively more people. You'd start with a couple when you meet people in pubs, and then you'd have big meetings. And I just told them what I was going to do. And I think if you're kind of straightforward with people, that is very helpful. And also I think they liked the idea. They saw the absurdity in it. They saw how ridiculous it was to do this. And they also saw that as kind of there was a sort of profound idea in it as well, because it was a public event and their families could watch it. So it was a sort of act of sort of witness in a way. And they got it instinctively. The reenactors just, on the whole, I didn't engage with them that much because I didn't want to lie to them. But the guy who was working with the reenactors just told them it was going to be a non-political reenactment, which is actually impossible anyway, but it's of a political event from a political sort of campaign. But they were happy with that, and so that was fine. But I was sort of more interested in the miners and sort of nurturing them and talking to them, really.
That's quite interesting, because how do you work as a director? You know, so you're working with two different groups, also all the time, often hundreds of people, maybe in some of your more like participatory artworks. What does maybe like a pre-show pep talk from you look like? What kind of a director are you? Quite hands-on, you know?
I try and be really relaxed and not lose it, and sort of, I'm not a shouter. I might be shouting inside, but I try and be really sort of calm and just be straightforward with people. With this, I'd lost control of the project. It became a film shoot, effectively, so I was just wandering about and just like not knowing really what to do. I mean, I could have, if I'd have been knocked over by a bus a week before, it still would have happened as much the same as it happened on that day. So I wasn't really needed. I'd done my work, effectively. My work was really talking to people and not documenting it, not filming them, not photographing them as I saw them, or recording them even. It was just sitting and chatting, not checking my phone or anything like that, you know. And so it was very just about meeting people and convincing them that this was the right thing to do.
You said something really interesting there, which was about kind of like loss of control. It became a film shoot. When you're working at this kind of scale, I'm imagining you're having to surrender over control. That is just a part of it.
Wow.
Maybe, to a certain extent, maybe, for example, I think I read in the book on one of the days the weather was really shit on one of the days about the orgreave. Yeah, how do you find that? Do you think that giving over control helps the work, enriches it? Do you find it stressful, I'd imagine?
Well, you have to give people a space to bring their own. I mean, I'm not an expert on the miners' strike. Those men were who were in it. You know, they were literally living history. They are the experts. So you have to let them, give them a space to improvise, to do things, which was really important. I quite like losing control up to a point. I mean, I think it's quite good to do that. And if you're working in the public realm, you immediately lose control. You know, the most important thing you can't control is the weather. And then you know, all it takes is one person to do something, and that could be very, you know, someone to throw a proper punch or something to go badly wrong, and that's it. But there's an excitement there, and I like that. I mean, you don't really get that in galleries so much, you know, which are places of control, effectively, which is why they're so great. You know, that's why people show in galleries, because they can control the environment. I quite like both up to a point. I mean, I like uncontrollable environments. I like messiness. That's where interesting things happen, when things get messy, I think.
I think
we have... go on to the next?
Yeah, let's move on to... So this project also relates really well to what you're talking about here. So this is definitely... perhaps you say one of your most controversial or foolhardy projects.
I think foolhardy, risky, stupid projects in that order. I got a car was destroyed, many cars were destroyed in Baghdad in the sectarian war that happened after the invasion, effectively, the civil war, and I wanted to put one on the fourth plinth to rot in public, and so people could watch it rot and disintegrate and make a horrible mess, based in the centre of London. Clearly was never going to be commissioned, but it was shortlisted, so that's something. And then I just thought, I need to actually do something, get a piece of evidence from Iraq, from that sectarian civil war, and tour it around Britain or America. And in the end, I got the opportunity to go on a road trip, and I toured a crushed car. It was crushed for a number of reasons, but it was got from Baghdad, from a car pound where all the cars that had been blown up. The bomb was not in the car, but the car was sort of killed by the bomb, effectively. And we just went around America with that sign on the side, and with an Iraqi citizen, the guy sitting there, and an American soldier, and we just talked to the public. I mean, the incredibly irresponsible thing to do, potentially. You know, people could have shot us, literally. You know, you just don't know what. And also, you don't know what sort of traumas people are having who walk around in the street. We met Iraqis who were at a university who were training to be doctors on some scheme, and so they talked about it in a very visceral way. So you know, when I see that, I can smell. It's the smell that comes back. And then you meet former soldiers, you meet Vietnam vets. Everyone in America has some connection to the military, it seemed. So it was very. It was not stressful as such, but you had to treat everyone equally, and we gave flyers out, and we talked to people in a very bland way. We weren't political at all. There's no need to be political about that. You just take it places and people will talk to you. It's now in the Imperial War Museum, actually.
How long did it tour?
About 3 weeks. And we went to the deep south. We went to Alabama, Tennessee, Texas, Arizona. We went to Ohio. We went to potentially quite hostile places, but Obama had just been made a president, and it was quite calm. I mean, I don't think you could do anything like that now. I think you'd really be in a lot of trouble if you did. But it was weirdly calm and never mobbed. It was just people passing by and talking to us. It was my favorite project, actually.
I think also something you said there about that you could never do it now. In the book, you say that you didn't film the public, you filmed them as minimally as possible, right? And that's really interesting to me because I think that you said it was about not making them feel self-conscious they were part of content, maybe, and that, or maybe not, but feels like maybe something that people now, if they're entering a public artwork on the street, they maybe feel like I'm signing myself up to be part of content, basically.
Or they take a picture of it with their phone. That's what most people do when they see something now. But I didn't want to. We really under-documented it, as you can tell. I was the only photographer. I had a crappy camera, but I had a black smudge in the middle of. Can you see it? There's like a black smudge on every photograph. So we really under-documented it. We did film people in a very rudimentary way. We didn't want to intimidate people with cameras, especially if they're talking about their families or religion or politics, all these quite sensitive subjects. Even for Americans, they were quite wary. They thought it was a trap, basically. They thought it was some sort of trap from some sort of political party or something, or some pressure group, which it wasn't. I mean, it was an art project. And so we were just trying to get people to talk. And, you know, some people really didn't want to see it. Some people hated it. Some people liked it. But everyone was respectful, which taught me a lot about America. It was quite heartening, really.
How do you feel about permissions? Do you ask for permission a lot?
To do what?
Any of these things?
We had permissions to stop at places.
Okay.
And that was about it. But, that was about it. And some were public spaces where you could just stop. And so it was within our rights to do that. But we got stopped by the police once or twice, but they were just interested in it. They wanted to know what kind of car it was. Which, that was... A lot of men just wanted to know what kind of car it was and try to work it out. But then you got onto maybe more interesting subjects.
So this is, very different working with students, sixth form students, right?
These are students, yes. These are a group of students in North London in a state school that had just been made an academy, but it was effectively a state school.
And why did you choose to work with students? So this is a still from a recent film of yours,
Yes.
Everybody in the Place, which I mentioned earlier. It's kind of an incomplete history of Britain, right?
That's what it's called. Well, why did I work with these young people? I gave a talk at a school. I was asked to give a talk at a school, and it was to a group of teenagers, and I don't have kids, and I was just like faced with this group of like 150 young people, and I just thought they're really going to hate me. Who am I to tell them about anything? And in the end, it was an amazing talk. And I just thought, when I was commissioned to make a film about London and clubs, I just thought there's nothing more boring than this subject in a way. We've got clubs in the 80s because it's just regurgitated and it's mythologized. But it's about Acid House, and I thought, well, actually, that's a story of Britain, effectively. It's a national story. Anyway, so I thought, I'm going to go back and talk to these young people, politics class, they're between 16 and 18, and talk to them about my view of Britain at that time and how it created this environment where this music would happen and become like a social phenomenon. And most of those young people, if not all of them, most of their parents were not born in Britain, so they had no knowledge of British politics or the music scene. So for them, it was like watching the news, but also a very, very old-fashioned version of Britain as well, pre-internet. And pre-mobile phone and all this, the way people looked and dressed and so on. So they were kind of fascinated by a view of Britain they didn't really know about, even though it was 30, 40 years. So they saw some footage from the miners' strike, and they couldn't believe, they'd never seen anything like it, like 15,000 white men in a field fighting each other. It just didn't look right to them. They couldn't work out why that was. And so it was so interesting seeing it through their eyes. So basically, and this is a moment in the film where we're just playing with some equipment.
That's a great moment of the film.
No, she was fantastic. And, so I was basically, in the end, you're making a film about the past, but it's actually about the future. It's not about the past, Britain's past, it's about the future of Britain, because that's what they are, effectively. And it was 2 years after the Brexit vote, and they'd all been racially abused in the street, apparently. I mean, it's so depressing, hearing about it. But they were very hopeful about the country and very interested in things and sort of full of life in a way that you might not expect. And yes, so one part in the film, we just have some equipment and they have a little play on it. It's just a kind of breakout session. So it's very sweet, and it's quite weird when you make a film and you spend 3 months editing it. So I spent 3 months with them afterwards in their presence, the whole summer, thinking about them and looking at them. And I bump into them occasionally, some of these young people.
Maybe we could you have a trailer here of the film, and I
Yes.
think it really encapsulates kind of everything quite perfectly.
Yes. I'm going to show you the trailer. It's 1.5 minutes long. It's very noisy, but it shows you all the elements that I talk about to them. It's an incredible track that builds, and there's like this orgasmic moment, but also the film isn't as exciting as the trailer. It never can be, but I just wanted to make something that really just had every element in terms of historical archive, but also them as well, these young people. So hopefully this will work.
Fingers crossed.
Yep, so that's the trailer. Let's take off.
It's funny in that, because it shows so many of the elements perfectly, but what we don't see is you in the classroom acting as kind of like a lecturer.
I'm a teacher. For that day, I was teaching the young people, talking to the young people about the 80s and early 90s as I saw it. But yeah, I'm not going to be in the trailer. It's awful to see yourself on screen and hear yourself as well. But I'm in the film a lot. It's actually at 180 Studios at the moment. There's an exhibition called Reverb, and it's on the whole film. You can see in a big projection. But it was the most tiring day of my life talking to those young people. They're very well behaved, but teaching is it's acting effectively. It's insane. It was great to do it. So, but I am in the film, unfortunately. Yeah.
And in the film, like we're saying, you're a teacher, but it's kind of interesting to me because so much of your work, the first chapter of the book is all about music, right? So much of your work is about documenting music. And I'm kind of interested in what you think your role is there. Is it like a critic, fan, like a lecturer? Do you know what I mean?
It's just meant to be a friendly face, just trying to explain. I think even during the film and telling them how I see these things connected, I do say to them, this is just a personal opinion. I might be totally wrong, so I'm not teaching in that way. I'm just giving opinions about how music affects society and is part of society. That diagram I showed at the beginning, with the arrows, that's the script for that film is basically that diagram, which I made in 1996. So it's been on my mind to make a film like that. So I'm very glad I made it. And if I was to make it again, I'd add some elements, one of which is this. This is the cue to go into a club called Shelley's Laserdome, one of the most sort of legendary nightclubs. And I just thought how similar those images are of people going to work in sort of early Edwardian time. Some of the first footage of working class people in Britain were outside mills and factories. They were filmed leaving and entering work. And it was a way to get lots of faces of people who then would go and see themselves at the cinema 2 weeks later once they developed the film. So it was a very clever kind of marketing technique. But these young people are going into a site. Often they'd be going into former factories and warehouses to enjoy yourself rather than to work. And they're very young. They're like teenagers. You see them, this crowd, this queue going in. They're literally like 13 to sort of 16-year-olds, most of them. And of course, child labor and so on. So I just thought there were these echoes of the beginning of a century and end of a century about work and enjoyment and social lives and so on. Where are we going now?
Oh,
you
there we
wanted
go.
fans. You like
did.
fan work, don't you?
So yeah, one of my favorite projects of yours is about Depeche Mode fans.
Depeche Mode fans.
Depeche Mode fans.
This is Manic Street Preacher
That's
Sounds.
okay. The same kind of
I will go to Depeche Mode
Thank
fans.
you. Yeah, perfect.
This is Tehran, probably mid-90s. I made a film about Depeche Mode fans. I was asked to by the record company, Mute. It ended up as like most films do, as a kind of minor disaster because it was never seen for a number of bizarre reasons. But the film exists and does get shown. And there's just a few photographs from it. We interview a guy who lives in Canada now who was a fan in the 90s and 80s with these incredible photographs of him and his friend just talking about what happens in Tehran, in Iran, when you were found with bootleg cassettes by the band. And then there's a big section on Russia and how that band changed people's lives because they were sort of connected intimately with the end of communism, the end of the Cold War, because they were very popular in Russia anyway, and this kind of liberation through music happens. It's kind of similar to what happened to Americans with the Beatles. That happened there, but times 10, I would argue. So this is, what an amazing photograph of these fans in Red Square, probably early 90s. And they would meet up. Thousands of fans would meet up, often young men wearing their mum's clothes and stuff, dressed in very outlandish ways, with their hair dye and all that kind of stuff. Teenage boys often, with girls as well, but just like all meeting together, and they still meet and talk about the band, and young people meet and talk about the band. That's on Dave Gahan's 44th birthday. There's like big meetups and parties.
I think also something I didn't realize until seeing this documentary is how dedicated specifically Eastern Europe is to that band.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of dealing with this sort of sanctity of this icon of what this band means to people. What is that like in terms of, does it affect your creative decisions?
No, it's just brilliant because these people are so extremely happy to see you because you're making a film about their favorite thing in the world, and so they just treat you like gods, basically. That's what happened. So that was really great, and they were, in Russia, we were more or less kidnapped by a group of fans. They just took us everywhere and gave great interviews and were very funny and very warm to us. I think people, I've been to Russia quite a lot, and it's so tragic now with the country, but I've always enjoyed being around Russians, in these situations especially, and in Mexico as well. They take it very seriously, like a religion. It's almost part of Catholicism for a lot of people. In England, it's very different, We filmed in a church that was for goths. This church in Cambridge, it had a goth service, and they played Depeche Mode songs. It was all very dreary and gothy in English, it's self-pitying, it was fantastic. So it kind of brings out national characteristics when you make a film about a band and how people react to it. And this is a notebook by a young girl who did these amazing drawings about her life with the band, her fantasy life with the band. All in biro, so you can't really correct biro. So it's just amazing. 2 books she made of like stories of her and her mates dressing up and sort of marrying the band. And then this is a German family. That's sort of one of the reasons the film was never seen, because they had fun with the band. They dressed up as characters from the videos, and a lot of German fans were absolutely horrified by their behavior because they weren't taking them seriously enough. But they were great.
Well, this is kind of, maybe it's sacrilege here in terms of me speaking against Depeche Mode, but this is maybe like a lighter controversy in comparison to maybe some more recent works. Like, you've been doing a lot of work with the Murdoch family, not with them. No. Maybe you have, I don't think so, but
you
never
against
know.
the Murdoch family. I did a print that was like 50 quid fundraiser for people affected by the bushfires in America, and I made a bit of very basic Photoshop. I didn't actually do it. I did it with Fraser. I worked with Fraser Mugridge a lot. and we knocked up something quite quickly, and this is Lachlan Murdoch's house being engulfed by a bushfire. I mean, it's a visualization of it. It didn't happen. And then some members of the family literally wrote to me, Murdoch family, saying, how dare you do that? There could be a child in that house. It's like, yeah, but it's a print. It's a Photoshop print. It's not actually a real thing. And it makes you realize these people, they're the best education money can buy, presumably, but they're still totally not in a reality that we would understand. So I did, that's Rupert. That's a test burn of Rupert, and we made a sculpture of Rupert and Lachlan, and it burnt over a 12-hour period in Melbourne, which is their hometown, is their base. It's where they were born, basically. That's where family are from. And it was just kind of unannounced, because you didn't want people to know what it was in case it got shut down for whatever reason, or picketed. And it was the first day out of a 210-day lockdown, that people could leave their homes and socialise, and so people came and watched Rupert Murdoch.
Come to see this. It's
yeah,
perfect.
That's how they spent their day of freedom, their first day of freedom, basically.
And you just said there that you work with to do the paintings. That's quite interesting because
what paintings are those?
That one, this one here, exactly. It's a print,
this is a piece
right?
of graphic design.
Piece of graphic design, which is exactly what I'm going to talk about next. It's a very good segue, if anyone noticed.
Should we talk about the posters?
Let's talk about posters.
There we go. That's a kind of insert in the Frieze Art Fair newspaper called Welcome to the Shit Show. It was during a lot of problems with Brexit in 2019. I wanted it as a big poster as you arrived at Heathrow Airport. As first thing you saw as you're getting your bags, just work to the... I mean, it could have, you know... again, with Fraser. And Fraser and I have worked a lot together, and he sort of facilitates ideas I have. And this is an exhibition of prints, where he was involved in a lot of them. But, I mean, there's nothing... Going back to the first speaker, really, there's nothing better than seeing your work in the public realm on a billboard. This is Broadway Market. I'm sure a lot of you know Broadway Market, I'm sure. And this is during lockdown, and I was asked to create a series of posters for World Human Rights Day. So I chose about a dozen places around the world, in Britain, but also America and Europe and elsewhere, where human rights were not being respected, and just made this statement. And so that's the big sort of spot at the end of Broadway Market. But to see something in the street is so thrilling for me personally, because you can look at stuff like on your phone all day. It's not real, and for me, until it's on the streets. And so I've done quite a lot of things since that was a week before the election. I had this phrase, "We have been swimming in shit," which was, has a double meaning, obviously. And the people who did that other poster, a fantastic company called Build Hollywood, they will give you poster sites if they like what you're doing. They're quite political, but also they do campaigns for Nike or whatever, and then they give artists space. And of course, that being during lockdown, this is one of the premier sites in London. No one was advertising during lockdown, and so you could get these incredible sites and coverage. So we did that. So we had that. So there they are, Build Hollywood. And so we had 14 Years of Hurt, which refers to the song, 30 Years of Hurt, the football song, 3 lines. And then I made a few I've done, the street is the best place to see work, I think, to see art. So Thank God for Immigrants was a poster I'd made, and I thought we should do a very, very pop culture version of it. 2 men whose both their fathers were not born in Britain, who were quite famously immigrants. Maybe less Andrew Ridgeley, his father was a Yemeni Egyptian. And then, other ones, so it's basically sort of propaganda, effectively, in a sense. It's just like sloganeering, but I love it, and I love doing it. Maybe I would have been in advertising if I hadn't have taken a kind of odd route. But
I guess because we're just flown by, before we get to some audience questions,
yes.
I just had one more, which is some of these posters, especially We've Been Swimming in Shit, very funny as well.
Yes.
What makes you laugh?
Oh, I'm a human being, so most things make me laugh. My humor, I don't want to reveal too much because I reveal my age. What do I watch at the moment? Most things. I'm obsessed with Alan Partridge, but most men of my age are, because you slowly turn into him, whether you want to or not, basically. But I do like Steve Coogan. I mean, you know, I think he's something of a genius, basically. But I like lots of stuff, you know.
Okay,
I watch loads of telly. I love watching telly, so I watch most comedy on telly. Are we getting questions?
We're going to do some questions now. Just haven't got time for many, so actually this one's maybe a big one. We'll just end with this. If you could change anything, what do you want to change about your industry? That's from All Projects.
My industry. Who's that from?
All Projects. I think it's not a name, but maybe.
That's such a good question. I mean, I think you mean the art world by industry,
Yeah,
don't
I
you?
think so.
I think it's people feel very alienated from art a lot of the time because there's such a concentration on value and money and auction prices and how much things are. And I think that's a real barrier to people enjoying art and thinking about it sensibly. So I think children are a very good audience for art because they're not interested in how much things cost. They just want to connect with it in a very visceral, straightforward way. So I think that and the sort of elitism of it as well. I mean, it's very interesting being an artist. You know, literally one day you can be in a prison talking to people, doing an art class in prison, and the next day you're speaking to some sort of a billionaire or billionaire's wife or some people with insane amounts of money. You know, and to be honest, I don't think I've met more ill-informed, sort of racist people than I have at sort of art dinners sometimes. You know, people who absolutely think they know what's going on in the world because they're rich, and that gives them the entitlement to sort of tell you what they think about these people or those people. So you do get a lot of that, and I've lost my patience with that. So that can be quite testing. But I'm quite happy to go to those things and meet those people just to remind me, in a sense, why it is I do what I do rather than something else, I think. This is the inflatable Stonehenge, by the way. I know we don't have long, do we?
I think, yeah, we're going to have to, but we can end on these images.
We can end on these images. Well, that's the sign I did with Fraser. Yeah, we should end on the images.
Yeah.
Apparently, I can sign books for like another 20 minutes in the shop.
It's true. If anyone wants to get a book signed, the bar is going to be open for around another 15 minutes where you can find Art is Magic. Jeremy,
So
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.